Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Sage Witch Mooncast. I'm your host, Samantha, and this is essentially my first actual podcast that I'm going to be sharing on Spotify for sure, and I'm not sure what else, but we'll see. I'm pretty excited. In the past, I've made YouTube videos and kind of treated them as my podcast, but I have finally learned how to use a host and all the other things, the technical things that come along with making a podcast. So this will be my first actual podcast. So thank you so much for joining me. As I've said before, I am a one-woman show. I do all my own social media content. I do all my own blog posts. I write all my own, podcasts and video editing and you name it, along with being, a homeschooling mom and taking care of a little farm out in the country. So I'm learning as I go, and it can be really difficult sometimes, and finding a good balance can also be hard, but thank you all who have stuck with me. So let's get on to the topic at hand today. One question that I frequently get asked is, how do I become a witch? This is both a simple and kind of complicated question. The first thing you need to ask yourself is, what is a witch? What do you think a witch is? I'll tell you that if you ask 10 people, you'll get 10 different answers. So, bear in mind that what I'm going to tell you today is my own interpretation. So, what is a witch? A witch is someone who seeks to understand universal energies and uses them in their craft to enact change in their lives. It doesn't matter which god or goddess you choose to honor, if any at all. A witch can be an atheist, and even though some might disagree, they can be Christians. Now, it's not up to me to decide if there can be Christian witches or not. All I'm saying is that I have seen professed Christians practicing witchcraft. Therefore, they do exist, but I digress. If you seek to connect and work with the natural energies of the universe, you're already a witch. It really is that simple. I think there's a common misconception that in order to be a witch, one must look a certain way, have their altar a certain way, and all around just kind of fit an aesthetic. A witch can look like anyone, and a witch's altar can look like anything. My favorite long-standing altar is just a little table, a candle, and an incense holder. Personally, I tend not to care for cluttered altars. They're hard to keep clean, and for me, that is a must. I don't want a bunch of dust and stagnant energies just kind of hanging around my sacred space. And as far as how a witch looks, well, they can look like anyone. If you like the witchcore aesthetic, then by all means, go for it. But you can be a witch in a pink tutu if you wanted to. Much of the reason for the look or aesthetic is that when we change our appearance, we change our focus and our energies. Humans are very tactile beings, and when we create altars and dress a certain way, we're signaling to ourselves that this is magic time. But again, that can look different for everyone, and it's important not to get caught up in the idea that if we don't fit that ideal, our magic and spirituality is lessened. Inspiration is a beautiful thing, but it should not limit you or make you feel like you're lacking. I also think some confusion comes from what kind of which someone is. In our modern times, we use these titles to help us connect with other like-minded witches. There are green witches, sea witches, hedge witches, folk witches, and the list goes on. I like to say they don't matter, but we are connected now more than ever through technology, and knowing what kind of witch you are can help you connect to others as well as keep you from associating with people you would rather not. It really is important not to let yourself become limited by these titles, though. A witch's goal should be to know and to learn. If you limit yourself to what you can learn, you are limiting yourself as a witch. In the end, you get to choose what you include in your craft and what you do not. But knowing about different paths can only benefit you. Which brings me to my next point. The why is so much more important than the how. Why do you want to be a witch? Why does it call to you? The how is easy to find. There are countless books on spells and rituals and paths out there. But the why is entirely up to you. I cannot tell you your why, but I can tell you mine. The reason I became a witch is because I felt and saw the connection I had with nature and wanted to strengthen that bond. That is my why in a nutshell. I use witchcraft to heal, as well as to protect myself energetically. I would like to say, though, that my protection magic does not come from a place of fear, but rather a desire to keep my energetic self centered, strong, and connected. Discussing protective magic is something that will need an entire Mooncast dedicated to just it, but it's something I'll cover more in depth in the future. One warning I wish to give you is if you are seeking to become a witch because you want power and control, you are doing it for the wrong reason. I know, that's a strong statement. And there are many who will disagree with me on this, but they can talk about it in their own podcast. The reason I say this is because I have watched people who have experienced trauma in their lives turn to witchcraft for control and even revenge. In my opinion, that's not what witchcraft is about. It's about connection with nature and helping you and others, should they ask, reach your highest potential. Another thing I feel the need to touch on is the difference between a witch and a Wiccan. This is kind of a common misconception that in order to be a witch, you have to follow the Wiccan path or be a Wiccan. And that's just not so. A Wiccan is someone who follows the Wiccan path, and you do not have to be a Wiccan to be a witch. Wiccans have specific guidelines, tools, celebrations, and it's a path all on its own. A witch, on the other hand, is simply someone who works spells, usually involving herbs, crystals, incense, and so on. And conversely, not all Wiccans work spells either. Some just erect altars and honor their deities when their path dictates. So, with all that said, if I were to give you a checklist to becoming a witch, it would go something like this. Number 1, decide you want to be a witch. Number 2, decide why you want to become a witch. Number 3, research, read, and experiment with many different paths. We talked about your why. Well, let your why be your guiding factor. Let your why be what defines your spiritual values. If a path doesn't align with your why, your spiritual values, take what you can from it and move on. And don't be afraid to try many paths. You are not going to anger some mystical being by trying something new. That is a very fear-based mindset to have and has no place in your path. I think the idea of angering the divine was one of the hardest undoings of my Christian upbringing. If at all possible, try to purge that mindset if you have it. Gods and nature are not some parent we're trying to gain approval from. They are our teachers. They're our best teachers, and we align with their energies to reach, again, our highest potential. I've personally researched and tried out many different paths in my life. Some of them came close to meeting my needs, but ultimately I could not find one that fit my why perfectly. So I decided to write my own, as well as write a book about it. Shameless plug, that book will be released later this year. I think the most important part of becoming a witch is simply remaining true to yourself. As I said before, we are very connected to one another through social media, and you are going to find witches who will make the claim that their path is the way and the one only way. While it might be the path for them, no one has the authority to decide what is and isn't a legitimate path. Our paths are personal, as they should be. So, I hope this cleared a few things up. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or topics you'd like me to cover in the future, feel free to contact me on social media at the Sayge Witch. And if you'd like to follow me for updates or just random thoughts, I can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under the same name. You can also subscribe to my website at thesagewitch.wordpress.com, where I will be posting my most recent podcast on the homepage. I'm hoping to be putting out at least one podcast per month, maybe more once I get the hang of all of this. Thank you again for listening, and I wish you the best of all seasons.